Alright. Lilac, really? You better not knock my camera down. Please tread lightly. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Shay. If you're new here, to be honest, I don't care about y'all subscribing, so I'm not gonna tell you to. I don't care if you watch. I'm just doing my hobbies, and if you want to watch, cool. If not, that's cool too. Like I said it in my last video, which was a vlog from 2022. I don't care anymore. So do what you want to do with this. This is my first book review back after leaving a 10+ year relationship with social media. I know that there's probably people, potentially, there's people out there who are wondering why I don't have Instagram, Twitter, TikTok anymore. And really it was because I was tired of being perceived and having that perception distorted by people who were enamored by this container that is my body, that holds my soul. And honestly, I was starting to realize that Instagram now, one, it's a flea market. Instagram is a flea market. I'm trying to reduce my consumerism. I've been trying to reduce my consumerism for years now. I've just not been very vocal about it, just because that's not what people give a F about. But I've been on my road to sustainability for quite some time now. I first found out about how insidious the fashion industry was in like 2015. So I was done then. But you know, okay, cat. But yeah, so Instagram is now a flea market, and it's geared towards encouraging you to stay on the app and buy things. And that's just not what I want to be doing with my life. I don't want to be somebody who sells people things, nor do I want to be the type of person who is so easily influenced that I'm always on Instagram buying shit. So in addition to that, I've realized now that people see Instagram as a dating app. When I got on social media, it was really just to express my creativity. I've always been a creative person. I'm a fashion girl. I love fashion, I love hair, I love beauty, and really I like to create. And it feels like now with social media that it's really not about that anymore. And yeah, it's a dating app, and then in addition to it being a dating app, it's a lot of sex workers on Instagram. And that's no tea, no shade, shout out to the sex workers, but people have been mistaking me for one just because I'm beautiful, curvy, and a black woman. To be honest, those really are the only qualifying factors for why men were thinking that I was a sex worker, and it just didn't feel good to be perceived that way. Granted, yes, I had bikini pictures on my page, but I'm from Florida, so we all dress like that down there. That's just the culture that I'm from. But I see now that it's being perceived as me being a sex worker, and that's just not how I want to be portrayed or perceived on any media outlet. Because at this point, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all these platforms are really just a platform for people to showcase themselves. Lastly, I was tired of being stalked by people who refuse to invest in my human kindness, and you know, just want to watch the show, which is nothing wrong with that. But you know, when I got on social media, it was really just about actually connecting with people that you knew, people from your community, and it's just not that anymore. I was just thinking earlier, like I'm about to, later today, I am hanging out with a girl. I met her at pole class, and she's inviting some other women who I've never met before. And I'm excited that I don't have social media, because there's this thing now that when you meet people, they'll get your social media and then never speak to you again. And I just find that not, I just don't want to do that. It makes me feel discarded to have accumulated all these people who I never speak to, but when I post a story, everybody has watched it within 5 minutes but don't never have nothing to say to me. I find that weird personally. I'm personally seeking connections with depth, and social media is just not that anymore. But for my stalkers, my haters, and my fans, I appreciate y'all, and I hope you enjoy the journey of following me as much as I enjoy living it. I'm not here for money or views. Really, this software is to be used as an outlet for my love for my love and creativity as it relates to being a Black woman navigating this world. And whoever fuck with that, I fuck with you, period. With that being said, today I'm discussing Salvation, Black People in Love by Bell Hooks. And I wanted to introduce this conversation about love from a theoretical perspective, as many of the conversations that I've witnessed, a lot of Black people are only talking about celebrities and hypotheticals, not their real felt and lived realities. So let's break it down. In the intro of Salvation, Bell Hooks asserts that love is our hope, that all love relationships flourish when there is sustained commitment, that constancy in the midst of change strengthens bonds, that the choice to love is a necessary dimension of liberation. She says we should equally value and emulate Black protest and Black affirmation, for we require both. And that's a word. Citing Lorraine Hansberry's proclamation of Black folks in our deep knowing of love. Love is in our roots and ways. I think it's past time we start leading our relationships with self and those who share our complexion and cultural identity with the love that sustained our ancestors. So yeah, I think the way that she opened the book with these proclamations about what love is, how it, shapes our reality. And I think she's correct that love is our hope. People, in this world that we live in, things are always changing, things are always evolving, but we can have some level of constancy in our relationships, in our romantic relationships. And yeah, that's one of the ways that Black people sustain ourselves as a cultural group. So Chapter 1 and 2 covers love as a political tool and the ways hiding behind a mask of not having needs is a detriment to anyone. One thing that specifically stuck out was her description of Black family life from her childhood, stating that while providing is crucial in the economic structure we live in, providing simply is not enough in any relationship dynamic. I agree with that. Providing is basic survival, and everyone able-bodied with functioning cognition should be able to do it for themselves if possible. One of the things that comes up a lot now in like the dating conversation is that men should provide, but I think the way that our society is progressing, everybody should be providing for themselves, period. That's the bare minimum. That's just basic survival. Men and women, in order to have flourishing relationships, should be self-sufficient. And I think that is one of the reasons why the relationship realm is struggling, because a lot of people still have that. A lot of people are still stuck in the mindset that like women need to be taken care of. And no, we don't. Well, I think yes, women need to be taken care of, but in the same vein, men need to be taken care of too. But on a very basic level, people should be self-sufficient and exercising whatever autonomy they have access to. And I think that is one of the foundations for having thriving, flourishing relationships. So chapter 3 was titled The Issue of Self-Love, and it discusses how many women who sacrifice everything are bitter, that to choose love, we must choose a healthy model of feminine agency and self-actualization, one rooted in the understanding that when we love ourselves well, we are best able to love others. I'm gonna read that again. When we love ourselves well, not just love yourself, but loving yourself well, we are best able to love others. Religious teachings used to act as the primary source for love teachings in Black life, but the onset of racial integration and TV media turned our attention away from intracommunal connectedness, which included diversified representations of Black life. For centuries at this point, media has portrayed Black people as only unloving, and when Black characters are affectionate on screen, it's usually with someone who doesn't share their complexion. Just to kind of contextualize this part of the book, she shared a lot of her personal experiences. I believe Bell Hooks grew up in the 60s, so she was a sentient being before integration took place. So, and then she also cited books as well, other books of people who were around her age or were adults during that era, in talking about, you know, what life was like for Black people at that time. But I said it's no wonder why black male media representation for romantic relationships often mimics what's on TV. And yeah, I was specific about Black males because I think Black people in general are being targeted through media and TV, but I'm concerned for Black people as a whole, which is why I read the book, which is why I'm making this video. But the representation, it's that conversation of like Dr. Umar having to check men every time he's on their different podcasts and telling them that like he's really the only Black man in mainstream Black media that's like, cut it out with the interracial relationships, cut it out with, you know, anything that doesn't have to do with progressing Black culture and Black life. Bell Hooks states that if love is not present in our imagination, it will not be in our lives. So, and that is to say that if we're not seeing it represented on TV, because Black people, we for a long time were like the biggest watchers of TV, and if we're not seeing positive images of people who look like us loving each other, there's no way that, you know, and that's why there's such an issue now. Like we had shows in the late 90s and early 2000s, but that stuff didn't last long. And, you know, now we have reality TV, which is not pushing anything positive. She said, rarely are Black couples depicted processing, communicating. I think one show that has been able to do that, I actually watched I don't watch Love is Blind. I watched season 4 with Brett and Tiffany. I really liked them. And then this season I know was a hot mess with AD and Clay, but one of the things that kept coming up in the reunion was they were saying watching it was like therapy, and I'm like, I can agree with that to an extent, to see couples together processing, but I cried at that moment where Clay was addressing Brett, because it's like Black people are so, as a whole in general, and I can only speak for Black Americans, I don't know what it's like for other cultures, but Black people are struggling so bad in our romantic relationships because we've never really seen healthy relationships. And even in that reunion, Brett was even like, you know, I didn't have, you know, a ideal picture of a family growing up, and, you know, he's had to figure it out too. So yeah, we need to see more of Black couples processing and communicating and giving each other compassion, and not just that struggle love where like a dude make you wait 10 years to marry you, done cheated on you, had babies on you. Like, no, not that. I'm talking about somebody you're in a healthy relationship with and just going through normal things like, you know, adjusting to living together, adjusting to, you know, the world outside and what it's like to be a Black woman and be a Black man, and in the workspaces, how that affects us. Like, we need to see more of that. Before we can think about revitalizing Black romance and family life, those who are able need to look at themselves and their communication style with other Black people and ask yourself, does this honor God? And I'm more spiritual than I am religious, but I really agree with that statement. I know that it was first originally said in a joking way. I think it was said by Kirk Franklin on Twitter years ago, but it's like, seriously, when you're moving through the world, do your actions honor your God? Do your actions honor your family? Do your actions honor Black life and Black culture? Which is to say that in order for Black loving relationships to move away from femicide, pimping, hoeing, and hustling, we must model the change we wish to see, which takes courage. And I came to understand that I'm anti-interracial relationships, more specifically for Black men, because it seems like when I examine it, when I examine it from a general perspective, as well as from people who I've met personally, Black men tend to have a lot more red flags as to why they date interracially, while the Black women I've met who date interracially have more so been like, I was bullied, no Black boys ever liked me. But it seems like a lot of times when Black men are dating non-Black women, that they have to demean Black women in order to do so. Whereas you see it now with like the divest and hypergamy girls, but when I was coming up, say like college in my early 20s, you didn't really see Black women dating out. That wasn't really as popular. I think it is now. It's just not been as popular for us. Like, it's getting popular now, especially as Black women outpace Black men in education. There's, it's about love. A lot of times love is about proximity. So if you have all these Black women going to college and then Black men are not going to college at the same pace as us, what can you expect? So I came to understand interracial relationships in the same way that I have cults. People are looking for love without looking into the historical ramifications of the method they chose to attain it. Which is to say, like, I've been told that Black women are difficult to date. I've been told this. I was told this by two cousins. One was light skinned, one was dark skinned, but they both grew up around white people. But I had to tell the first one, because I had spoke to the light skinned cousin first. I'm like, do you realize that to say black women are difficult is to say that non-Black women are easy? I wouldn't want to be described as easy personally. I don't know about anybody else. I don't want to be easy to be with. And I think that a lot of times Black women, our traumas get demonized instead of worked with. You feel me? Where it's like, because it's like, at the end of the day, when you get into relationships, everybody has baggage. Most adults have baggage. We live in a very violent, unforgiving world. So most people have shit that they're dealing with. And so to characterize Black women as like people who don't deserve love because we've been through trauma, it just one, it doesn't feel good, and two, it paints a false picture of what it's like to be with women who are not Black, as if it's gonna be, peaches and roses every time. But I feel like with interracial relationships, shit gets strange every time. And this next chapter discusses that historical context. So chapter 4, valuing ourselves rightly. As the resulting children of the rapes of Black women slaves by white male patriarchs emerged, then came color caste hierarchies. While light-skinned Black men slaves were seen as a threat, light-skinned Black women slaves were seen as more likely to uphold white supremacist, imperialist, capitalist patriarchy. This is where we get light-skinned women being deemed as, more feminine, valuable, and submissive. Its purpose was to serve the interests of white males. And these systems of hierarchies have created the environment for dark-skinned children in Black families to be devalued. Here's a direct quote about how color caste systems and eventual integration were detrimental to dark-skinned children being educated and instructed by teachers who did not reflect or represent their reality. Racial integration of public schools gave Black children equal access to the same levels of information offered white children who attended these institutions. But on the other hand, it meant we were now being taught for the most part by unenlightened white teachers with biased perspectives. The fairer they were, the more likely, the fairer a student was, the more likely they were to be treated by teachers as capable of performing well. Segregated grade school, no Black child was made to feel that allegiance to the race was determined by not liking to do one's work. That changed with racial integration, and I put in the margins that this is the early aughts of the rise in anti-intellectualism, because when Black teachers were teaching Black children, I don't think there was ever a point where there were more men, Black males, as teachers, but I feel like at least when everybody at school was Black, there was no way to try to spin it and say, oh well, you being educated makes you white, or you being educated makes you feminine. But when you take, you know, Black representation out of education, it warps what it really is and has Black male children feeling like education is feminine and white. Period. So we have, through integration, the deterioration of Black pride in children by way of white female teachers who had a hand in orchestrating the school to prison pipeline. Hooks goes on to say that shame makes self-acceptance and self-love impossible. That it takes courage and vigilance to create a context where self-love can emerge. Collectively, Black people are empowered when we practice self-love as a revolutionary intervention that undermines practices of domination. And one can be poor and still be self-loving. She says, poverty does not create low self-esteem and self-hatred. Without challenging the politics of materialist greed, we cannot create the climate in Black life that will allow us to embrace non-market values. We can create love wherever we are. Valuing ourselves rightly means we understand love to be the only foundation of being that will sustain us in both times of lack and times of plenty. I think that part about creating a climate in Black life that allows us to embrace non-market values, I think is a really important one, because with the surgence of online dating coaches, most notably the deceased K. Samuels, this idea that we're only operating off of market value, I honestly hate those terms. And you know, this book was written 2001. This book was published in 2001, and Bell Hooks already understood that valuing ourselves has nothing to do with money. So that's where a lot of people are going wrong, and that's why relationships feel so transactional, because people are valuing themselves through money and through materialism. And so when that is what you value, that is how people will value you. I know that's right. No, period. For real. And so how do Black people move away from materialism, consumerism, greed, and transactional relationships? It is by valuing care, valuing nurturance, valuing surviving past, or providing past the level of survival. I said it's hard to be courageous and vigilant when you're money hungry. It is love that pulls us through the hard times. Hence why Diddy thought changing his name would make the bad stuff go away. But no, baby, you must atone for those things. You cannot just change your name to love and become love. Like, you got to become love before you change your name. You must atone for the horrible things you've done. You must atone for what you've stolen from people before you can actually value yourself rightly. And I go on to say that In Monique's interview with Shannon Sharp, which I'll discuss later, the materialism that Monique displayed while promoting Black unity and love was honestly incongruent, in my opinion. I agree that Oprah and Tyler Perry owe her money and should compensate her for those lost wages, but I think it's important to examine her desire for limousines and a Rolex watch just because men have it. And that's another thing with women, like wanting to be like men. I don't have that desire at all. I don't want to be like a man. I don't want to think like a man, none of that, because they're miserable and lonely. It's in the stats. It's in the stats. And I put in here, you know, how do we value ourselves rightly? By having the courage to denounce color caste, being mindful of our language, like ceasing to equating anything dark with evil, defending and validating the experience of darker skinned folks, and rejecting domination. And by rejecting domination, I mean standing in power and autonomy as an individual, making your own informed decisions, being an active participant in your life, and governing yourself towards your own life path. I want to return to being an active participant in your own life. I think that that is a big issue with women, if I'm honest. This whole, the trad wife thing, it's part of not wanting to be responsible for your life, because to not engage in work and finances, it doesn't make you more feminine. It makes the person who does do that for you, it gives them control over you. I think that everybody should be working, and I also feel like everybody should be getting paid livable wages, which is part of the problem of why women even want to go back to, you know, this traditional lifestyle, because they have the idea that it was better, but those ladies was on speed and getting sent to get a lobotomy if they wasn't acting right. So I just wouldn't want somebody to have that much control and power over me, because for me, growing up as a child, I went through that already. I don't want nobody else. I didn't want to transfer the power from my parents to another person. I want to stand in my own power. And I think that's one of the ways that women can progress. We'll get to men later. So in chapter 5, moving beyond shame, Hook states, so she says, the practice of self-love is difficult for everyone in a society that is more concerned with profit than well-being. It is even more difficult for Black folks, as we must constantly resist the negative perceptions of Blackness we are encouraged to embrace by dominant culture. We must be ever vigilant so that we do not end up evaluating each other using a standard of measurement created by white supremacist thinking. The heart of decolonization is the recognition of equality among humans, coupled with the understanding that racial categories which negatively stigmatize Blackness were created as a political tool of imperialist white domination. Period. Which, you know, I think she's just saying that we have to move away from, I think in the same way that women have to stop trying to be like men, Black people have to stop, or I think everybody, because America has been able to bolster itself as the best place, but it's like they did it off of the backs of Black slaves and indigenous people who were here. Indigenous people was here already. They stripped them people of their land. They stripped Black people of our original culture. So it's like, is America really the greatest place in the world? Or did they steal everything and conquer people and leave people desolate? And now, because white people were able to do that, everybody wants to be like them. I don't want to be like white people. I see what it's like being in their families. Hey, Lilac, staring at me. I don't want to be like them, and I don't want to evaluate people who look like me based on a standard that's just not a standard I want to live up to. Like, I could be doing that, and I probably would have a lot of money. I would have a lot of money if I moved like white people. But I really value love and empathy and compassion. I truly believe in my heart of hearts that love is our salvation. I watched Concrete Cowboys earlier, and even they were in the movie, they were talking about how you know, cowboys were tasked with handling cowboys were tasked with wrangling and training the horses, and you know, cow hands at the time, which was, you know, the white owners of farmlands, were considered the cow hands, and then black sharecroppers and black people who worked the farms were the cowboys. And in order to train horses, they were expected to break them and, you know, get them to submit. And the idea is to make the horse believe that you are the only way that they're going to survive. But what they said in the movie was that you get a horse to become disciplined through love. You get the horse to trust you. And I think if we can extend that type of love to animals, we should be able to extend that type of love to each other. But yeah, in regards to that last quote, the heart of decolonization is the recognition of equality among humans, coupled with the understanding that racial categories which negatively stigmatize black people were created as a political tool of imperialist white domination. Which is to say, in the words of Angela Davis, that freedom is a constant struggle. She wasn't lying. Baby, she wasn't lying. At all. Like, there's no easy way out of life. And that's why you see people who live fast and try to take shortcuts. Jail. You're going to jail. You're going to jail. Let me preface that with, I'm not necessarily an abolitionist, and I understand that jail and prison is a serious thing, but you know, we gotta laugh to keep from crying. So yeah, when a motherfucker need to go to jail, I'm gonna advocate for you to go to jail, period. Hooks goes on to assert that it was easier for black folks to create positive self-images of ourselves when we were not daily bombarded with negative screen images. And that once we left our all-black schools, gifted black male students disappeared. Which further iterates my earlier point on driving anti-intellectualism among black men. I'm one to pride myself on being brought up in black education, but there weren't many black male educators outside of a few physical education teachers, math teachers, and in my gifted and performing arts classes, the few black boys slowly phased out due to, I would say now, being alienated, because of, yeah, a lot of times they were either the only black boys in those classes, or wanting to fall in line with their peer group that was cooler. Because yeah, it wasn't cool to be into the arts and in gifted back then. I was very much considered a nerd. But yeah, I said they slowly phased out due to the alienation of a lack of representation and peer pressure from other misguided black boys. Black children, in reference to cultivating self-love, Bell Hooks shares that black children who are shamed by someone mocking their appearance do not jump for joy. They are psychologically wounded, which has created I think that is the thing that has created all the wounded comedians out there being picked on. I think if you sit there and look at people who become comedians, it's not beautiful people. It's people who were picked on as kids, and they've been able to turn their pain into their career. It was just like what Monique said in her Club Shay Shay interview. She was picked on for being fat, and she turned it into a career. I imagine probably the same for Cat Williams. Probably the same for it was one guy who I watched, but they all be ugly. Comedians all be ugly, or they be ugly, fat, short, facially challenged. And I believe, you know, oftentimes it comes from that childhood wound of having to become tough, having to be able to be witty and come up with something first before somebody gets you. And I can relate to the deeply wounding experience of being shamed as a child. First by my parents and older sibling and cousins, then later the schoolhouse peers and a few teachers, until I became a bully myself in high school. Like I said, when Monique discussed it, she went from, you know, SA to being bullied. So I know it takes gumption to have been bullied in childhood, and then again by entertainment industry executives, and then the internet again another 10 years later in reference to Monique. Bell references there being a difference in collective jokes and the type of jokes that shame and wound. Because yeah, I think a lot of time I come off as a very serious person to a lot of people, which is fine, because I don't believe in being friendly, but it's because people have not been friendly to me. I've been picked on, and so yeah, I have a wall up. I'm gonna stank face you, all that, period, because it does not feel good to be wounded in that way. But there is a difference. Like, it's one thing to tell a joke that people can relate to, and going back to the comedian thing, I prefer comedians who rag on themselves and use their own pain to be funny, versus the types of comedians who choose to punch down. That's just not my brand of comedy, and that is why I just never engaged comedy like that until one, because my parents shielded me from it. They didn't want us watching stuff like that because they were very vulgar. But you know, I had already been bullied, so I didn't want to hear, you know, I think I went to a comedy show once when I lived in Tampa, and I was so scared the whole time, because I'm like, please don't say nothing about me, because I don't want to get embarrassed. Like, it does not feel good. So Bell Hooks says, within a culture of domination, shaming others is one way to assert coercive power and dominance. And to give an example, I think that's exactly what Dave Chappelle is trying to do to trans people. Delegitimize them so that people don't respect them, so that they don't get rights. And a lot of people who don't think critically will tell you it's not that deep, but it's like, before things get to a place where they can get to legislation or people can advocate for their rights from a legal standpoint, it makes its rounds in social conversations first. So if in social conversations a person or group of people can't get respect, there's no way in hell they're ever going to get respect from a legal human rights perspective. And that shit matters. It matters. I said it brings me further into analyzing the things Monique said. It's clear she's experienced attempts by others to dominate her, and she apparently inflicted the same reality onto her oldest son. Ooh, period. But I think the truth remains that children who are constantly shamed cannot build healthy self-esteem. Bell Hooks reiterates how masking does not create an environment for integral living, stating, since so many Black families are poor and working class, it is more important for us to acknowledge and show how lacks in material privilege need not lead to emotional lacks. I know of no recent works that looks at how poor and working families create loving environments. White supremacist mainstream culture has always been and will always be primarily concerned with highlighting what does not work in Black families. Progressive Black people and our allies in struggle must do the work of calling attention to diverse strategies used to create positive self-esteem in all Black families. Masking invites us to create a false self, to misrepresent and dissimulate, that is, to take on whatever appearances are needed for a given situation. Masking destroys our capacity to be truth tellers. Period. Creating and maintaining personal integrity is especially hard in a culture of domination where lying is rewarded. The time has come for Black people to courageously claim our right to personal integrity and refuse to don a false self for anyone. Okay, in the long run, individuals who self-betray by always masking and pretending suffer. That was a little tug on my wig. So aside from our human instinct to at best have an everlasting drive for excitement and do our own thing, and at worst a drive for disobedience, I know many adults understand that their tendencies were in large part shaped by parents, and to take a step back from being rewarded for lying, we have to think about how and where children learn to lie. Because that's one of the things that I've thought deeply about, because I've been in no contact with my folks for quite some time now, because they're just not pleasant to be around. They weren't very kind to my siblings. Like, it was a point where they were being kinder to me because I didn't live with them anymore, but still treating my siblings like bullcrap, and I didn't want to witness that shit. It just didn't make sense. But yeah, I love that Bell Hooks says our word is our bond. I honestly want to bring that back to the lexicon, because yeah, I'm trying to make fetch happen in our attempt to usher in honest, loving, so the Black collective can thrive and move beyond survival. Like, but people will say on the dead homies and still lie, or on my mama and still lie. But it's because it's so deeply ingrained in our society. I've said this before. It's the same thing of like, we're wired to, I don't want to say be disobedient, but I think that humans are wired for autonomy. Bell Hooks goes on to say that poverty is no indication of moral belief, as some elites would try to make you believe. And if that is something that you believe, I think you should go to, I'm not gonna promote his channel because I think he's a creep a little bit, but just look on YouTube for people's stories. People who live in the trenches, die in the trenches. It's not necessarily because they're bad people. Poverty is manufactured. I think even economics, the economic model, that shit is manufactured. There is no scarcity on earth. It's enough water in the ocean for everybody. It's enough fish in the sea for everybody. It's enough fruit on the trees for everybody. It's enough rain coming from the sky for everybody. So this idea that like people gotta scratch and survive, it's made up. And so to try to paint people who are in poverty as the bad ones, that's kind of confusing to me, because poverty is manufactured. She also said that everyone could be stronger in the face of adversity, knowing they were not alone. Culture increasingly suggests anyone who names their suffering is trying to use victim status to get over. On the contrary, though, sane people with healthy self-esteem respond to oppression and exploitation by both acknowledging their pain and resisting. And so I asked at that point, how do we move beyond shame? By naming it, really. And that's something that I've come to understand, like, because we've been, just as a people, not even just Black people, we've been so conditioned to lie, so conditioned to be secretive, so conditioned to be ashamed of certain actions and things that we do and ways that we behave, that it's more palatable, it's easy to lie. And so when people like me name a shame or tell the truth, I'm getting the boot. And it's happened to me. It's happened to me more than once, But I believe that truth is my salvation. And don't get me wrong, everybody lies. I feel like most people lie for their own safety, whether it be physical safety, emotional safety, whatever it is. People lie to protect themselves, and I get that. Personally, I'm more of an omitter. I'm more of an omitter than I am just finna make some shit up. But yeah, I feel like we move beyond shame by naming it. Why should we move beyond shame? Because it's stifled the collective. It's why it feels like we're in this time loop of doing the same shit over and over and over, because nobody wants to tell the truth about what's really happening. Chapter 6, Mama Love, begins stating, newly freed slaves often spent lifetimes searching for their kin. The incredible resiliency of spirit enslaved Black people possessed has often deflected attention away from the legacy of psychological woundedness the experiences of enslavement generated. Slaves often set up households based on the same principles of coercive domination. So in the aftermath of slavery, white women did not have to acknowledge that male White women did not have to acknowledge the male rapists who abused enslaved black women, as these men had shifted the blame to the black women they inflicted violence on. Many black folks, men and women alike, internalized these stereotypes that were originally falsely projected onto enslaved black women. While many black folks would assert that their first love experience was from or with a black woman, negative stereotypes continue to warp the perception of black women. That's facts. As much as niggas love their mama, they don't want to continue the lineage. Because I think a lot of black men get stuck on black women having an issue with them not dating black women because their mom is black. But really the crux of it is that you have no desire to continue your bloodline in its most original state. Because for whatever, I don't know, whether it be that you hate your mom, hate what you look like, hate your dad, but I just can't wrap my mind around, because that's really my biggest thing. Like, if I'm to have a child, I want it to look like me, and I can't do that with somebody who's not black. No tea, no shade. No tea, no shade. There have been few external examples of how to treat another black woman with kindness, deference, tenderness, or an appreciative smile. Black women make a mistake when we assume that closing ourselves off and wearing the mask of indifference makes us strong or keeps us well. Really, it leads to stress and illnesses. And this is why I can't do hypergamy. I would be lying to myself and the person if I got into a relationship just to shift the responsibility of my survival onto another person in a way where I need to consistently betray my body's emotional signals. Because I think that's one of the tenets of Shira 7. I know that she purports herself as a financial advisor, but a man is not a plan. Because, like I said, all humans have a pervasive drive for autonomy, meaning people want to do what they want to do. And a lot of times when you tell somebody to do something, they're going to do the exact opposite just to assert their autonomy. And that's why I'm not here to control nobody. I'm not on this earth to, and I feel like hypergamy in the long run turns into manipulation, because you have to constantly be morphing and warping and contorting yourself to fit with this person just so you can have monetary provision. I just don't see the value in that. You know, no shade to the women who are hypergamous, but there is no love in hypergamy. It's transactional. And I feel like at the end of the day, if you're a lover girl like myself, it's never gonna give. It's never gonna give for you, because what you're actually looking for is an emotional connection, and you can't have an emotional connection with somebody who you have a transactional relationship with. That's just point blank period. It's one thing to be in a relationship and regulating your emotions when you go through life, but staying through infidelity for money, I'm better than that personally. I'm better than that. I don't want to be with somebody who would be unfaithful to me when our agreement was that we were with each other. Point blank period. So I wrote a few notes at the time of reading this, which state, the task of self-love is feeling your feelings, emotional vulnerability, and asserting our humanity by standing up for ourselves. Point blank period. Some scritches. You see my nails and you want some scritches. You see my nail and you want some scritches. You see my nail and you want some scritches. All right. So we left off at the end of chapter 6, Mama Love. And I really didn't go in depth too much, but really I just feel like people say that they love their mothers, but they don't love a lot of, specifically black men, I gotta call y'all out, black men who date interracially specifically, black men who date interracially will say that they love their mothers, but don't love their mothers enough to continue the bloodlines that look like their mothers. And I think that gets that idea gets misconstrued when a lot of black women are like, oh well, why aren't you dating somebody that looks like your mom? Like, that's just the wrong way to say it. Really, it's that, why don't you love your mother enough to continue her bloodline that looks like her, that is a representation of her physical embodiment, not just her soul? You could make a lot, like, but I truly and honestly feel like mixed and light-skinned people don't really carry the same essence of blackness, and that's just my personal belief, period. Sue me. Chapter 7, Cherishing Single Mothers. A few points that stood out to me were that in recent years, as more concrete statistics about who actually receives aid and how much money recipients are actually given are made public, anyone who is not blinded by biases has to face the extent to which negative images of black women on welfare are flaunted as a way to scapegoat them and leave unquestioned issues of class, race, imperialism when it comes to the allocation of funding. Which is to say that I think that people are really, really extremely harsh on black single mothers without acknowledging why they are in this position, because black women aren't single mothers in a vacuum. They're not getting themselves pregnant. They're not leaving themselves to raise children on their own. This is not all, this is not all happening just because black women have bad attitudes. Like, you're not convincing me that that's the majority. Like, there's a lot of other things that are part of the underlying issue, and it's not just the blame of an individual. There's no way that it's happening. If so many black men are confident enough to say that it is a large issue, you guys, a lot of you say that you want them, black single mothers, to take accountability, but really a lot of what you all are doing is creating the social commentary that leaves them in a position to not have adequate human rights. And so when, like I said earlier, when you are part of people's human rights are built socially first. We have to socially accept people before they can go to legal extents to legitimize themselves and their humanity and how they live in our world. She also says that black single mothers are represented as castrating bitches who want to irresponsibly breed children they cannot support. Coercive male domination erodes family values. Masses of women in this country know that male domination often means that men who head households do not willingly give their money to support the support of women and children. And she references the temperance movement, which was when male patriarchs that were heads of households were withholding money from families to support drinking and just all the different hobbies of men that we see today. Which in a way, I'm like, I understand a person wanting to enjoy their own money. I get that. But at the same time, if we are going to live in a patriarchy, part of that deal of men being their head of household is to give their income to support women and children. But here in the temperance movement, that wasn't going down. It wasn't going down for whatever reason. She goes on to say that black heads of household have no better track record than their white counterparts when the issue is providing material and emotional care to families. Discussion about the harmful effects of absent black male fathers has centralized love. Patriarchal thinking implies that simply by being present, black fathers ensure that that black children will have healthy self-esteem and self-love. Men do not make life good for women and children by simply being present. It is how they act and interact that makes a difference. Now that's a word. She goes on to say that emphasizing negative does not imply all black fathers are unkind, cruel, or irresponsible. But, hey girl. You just want to be seen. and get my attention. I ain't even been gone that long today. Why you up my behind? But until society stops blaming single mothers, no one is examining patriarchal male motives for fathering children they do not parent. Which again goes, you know, back to her mentioning the temperance movement. Like, you can't put the onus on Black single mothers when nobody's addressing why men who have children are not active participants in those children's lives. They're either have completely abandoned their responsibilities, are going around continuing to make mistakes without being guided properly, and continuing to create children that they are not willing to be responsible for. And yeah, she concludes with several statements, including, until this nation can acknowledge that patriarchal fathers who use coercion and other forms of violence to discipline children do not raise healthy, self-loving children, there will be no clear understanding of the value of any male choosing to be a loving parent. And really, that's just saying that men are not being socialized to be good parents. Or really, if you want to get down to it, men are largely, in large part, this is a generalization, men are not being socialized to be good people. And so when you're not a good person, you're not going to be a good parent. You're not going to be a good husband. You're not going to be a good brother. You're not going to be a good uncle. Like, and that's why we got so many men in our society running around rampant, because they're just simply not being socialized in a way that values them being loving. Not even just a loving parent. Just men and boys are not socialized as being caring and loving, when like that's literally what the earth is being sustained by. She also says that single mothers welcome the participation of male parental givers. Way too many women have internalized guilt about single parenting that has been unjustly placed upon them by our society, and have sought to bring men into the home and keep them there, even when the men were disruptive, exploitative, and cruel. These women are merely following the dictates of a society which tells them that the home is a better place if a man is present. And like the themes of the book have continued to highlight, providing is a basic survival. Any adult human should be providing for themselves, but if Black people are going to be a collective, if we are going to be a community, everybody has to be contributing to the love deposits. Men cannot be a part of, Black men cannot be a part of families in Black societies if all they do is take. And so part of learning not to only be takers is to make sure that we're socializing boys in a way where they are cultivating the language to talk about their feelings, being nurtured by not just mothers, but by fathers and other male parental figures. And we can't, because this chapter is about cherishing single mothers, but it's like, people are not going to, like, Black single mothers are an easy target. But if we're honest, if we have integrity, we can look at what's actually out in the world and see that it is not simply single mothers who are just the villain in the story. And really, when we look at even fictional depictions of villain stories, a lot of these villains were wronged first, were put in messed up positions first. So if Black single mothers are the villain, we need to look at the origin story, period. So chapter 8, loving Black masculinity, fathers, lovers, and friends. One of the first things that captured me about this chapter was the distinction she made about Black male representation. She says that academic discussions of Black masculinity based on real life studies highlighted the experiences of poor urban Black males and made that representative the norm. No wide range of options of Black male representation were there, because gender boxes them in very narrow, or they risk the ridicule of peers. Contemporary young Black men had had and have a level of discontent and rage that was and is far deeper than the anger of their fathers, because their expectations were and are greater. And you can see this echoed in, so like I recently watched a video about Black boyhood, and the creator recognized the rage from Black men in the 60s. It's devolved into a nihilism and apathy that sometimes characterized within a package of charisma, or what Black people have come to call swagger. And that's a survival tactic. Bell Hooks quotes Nathan McCall's account of he and his peers' view of Black men in their lives, which said, "I never heard my friends say they wanted to be like their fathers when they grew up. Why would we want that when we knew our fathers were catching hell?" And that kind of reminds me of even the movie I watched today, Concrete Cowboys, where one of the characters, Smush, he was ragging on Cole's father for being a garbage man. But it's like, being a garbage man is what keeps you alive for an extended period of time. It's what gives your family security. But I think a lot of people now don't value family. And I think that that's just a symptom of capitalism, American capitalism, the individualism that comes with fulfilling your own dreams and not necessarily sacrificing yourself for a family, which if a man is choosing that, that is his right. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just the people, like, there's a lot of people who date who are not choosing which one they want. And so it's creating this loop of people who are constantly in situations and feeling like they want more from something, but not getting real answers, because all the people involved have not made a decision on whether, okay, this is who I am. It's not, I don't want a family, but I do want a romantic partner, and this is the way I want to grow. Or, you know, there's people out there who are pursuing people who don't want families and just want to try to change somebody they are attracted to physically into becoming who they want personality wise, and it just doesn't work like that. People need to get on an accord. I watched an interview for the co-founder of Gangster's Disciples in Chicago, who echoed basically a similar sentiment to Nathan McCall, and basically saying that they emulated the hustlers. They emulated pimps, because that's who had all the money. The drug dealers had all the money, not the garbage workers, not the contractors, not the men who worked with their hands. And so that is what became the image for Black men to emulate collectively. With that, it was assumed that Black women would fall in line with patriarchal family structures that dehumanized their mind, bodies, and spirits. And when they didn't acquiesce to this structure, the sentiment that Black women were traitors was popularized, taking place in the early 70s. Love was not the issue, Bell shares. It was the homosocial competitive behavior with white men, moving in spite of them as opposed to focusing on inner and community healing. They sought power instead. White women's efforts and success towards their own autonomy seemed to fuel the rage many Black men felt, and many Black men turned to the sexual arena where they could financially and socially capitalize on the racialized stereotypes imposed on Black people's bodies from the time we were kind of colonized, which it goes back to that reason why so many Black people have become enticed by the world of vice, of pimping, hoeing, hustling, getting money fast, robbing people, because it's been popularized as the easy way out. And under this American capitalist system, a lot of people don't have the opportunities. I was telling somebody earlier, like, so many black and brown people are just in poverty. Is manufactured. People who are in poverty are being held there by a withholding of information. You know, people who didn't get the opportunity to go to college, people who were isolated either by becoming parentified and having to raise their parents multitude of children while the parents only worked and never gave the children any type of love, affection, or nurturance. And so you create this cycle where a person believes that they should be having a child young, and every generation after that continues to have children young because that's all they're seeing. So she goes on to say that non-benevolent patriarchs were the stereotypical pimp embodied. Another sentiment echoed by Gangsta's Disciple co-founder Ike: young black men idolized pimps, hustlers, and players as they were the ones with wealth, women, and materialism. Hardcore pimp masculinity did not and does not place value on love. The Playboy guy was not interested in getting married and having a family. Published in the 70s, Barbara Einrich's book on masculinity, The Heart of Men, American Dreams and the Flight from Commitment, called action to the widespread white male embrace of Playboy masculinity. The new Playboy was out to have fun and was willing to use and abuse women in the process. His value and worth was determined by his capacity to seduce women. Children and family were not important. While conservative whites targeted black masculinity, labeling it unstable and irresponsible, they did not launch a critique of the white Playboy. White male playboys legitimized the rejection of fatherhood, but when this stance was embraced by black males, it had disastrous implications for the black family. She says that irresponsibility is a key to staying young, and I think that this is a symptom of many people, not just black men. People are just not being raised people are just not being raised to understand that their life is their own. It's being stripped. That autonomy, that self-power, that belief in self is being stripped from people through all kinds of institutions. I know that it's definitely being done in the public school system. People's autonomy and power being taken away, this authoritarian way of bringing children up in a religious sense, believing that your highest self exists outside of you. Like, people need need self-empowerment, not looking at power outside of them and validating that. People need to validate the power in themselves, and that's really how we grow as people. Since the tenets of patriarchal masculinity upheld the notion that it was not manly to parent lovingly, most unemployed black men did not spend their leisure time with children. They spent time with their male buddies. Patriarchal thinking still encourages women and men to believe that paternal contribution to parenting is never as important as mothers. I'd argue that many who staunchly believe in cis-heterosexual two-parent households, if abiding by patriarchal thinking, believe that paternal contribution is never as important as that of mothers. This is an idea that we must shift. Fathers can be involved intimately from the time of conception, throughout pregnancy, and the remainder of that child's life in a healthy and productive way. Bell goes on to share that loving fathers do not abandon families, and patriarchal thinking does not encourage men to be self-loving. And the question from there is, how does one become loving in a system of domination that calls us to seek wealth, power, and status and materialism? Feminist thinking is useful to black males and all males who are grappling with the issue of self-love, because it offers strategies that enable them to challenge and change patriarchal masculinity. In black life, males often learn on the one hand to over-identify with the penis, and on the other hand to see the penis and sexuality in general as the enemy of their well-being. This then sets the stage for scapegoating and blaming women, whether they be mothers or lovers. The male who never learns how to take care of his basic needs is infantilized. We have all heard black males praise their mothers and fault all the other women in their lives who do not subordinate their needs to the way his mama did. Ooh, Miss Hook done got spicy with y'all. I call this the baby boy effect, where, as Bell states, boys are damaged, hence mothers force them to be symbolic partners, infantilize or fail to nurture them in necessary skills for adulthood. Bell Hook asks, whose interest does it really serve to instill in the public's image that only black men can raise a healthy black male child in a society where so many black males refuse to engage in parenting? All children need positive connections with adult men. Those men do not have to be their fathers. Most patriarchal men do not wish to be loving parental caretakers. Black mothers raising sons in patriarchal culture must work doubly hard to counter negative messages about masculinity and female leadership. The good man will be empathetic and strong, autonomous and connected, responsible to self, to family and friends, and to society, and capable of understanding how those responsibilities are ultimately inseparable. When black males internalize the values of white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, they deny their need to love and be loved. Period. Jarvis J. Masters, who is a black male confined to death row, said that he did not fear prison because it is a place that welcomes a man who is full of rage and violence. It is never too late for black males to learn the art of loving. I believe that wholeheartedly, and really that was the end of that chapter. Yeah, I think it's gonna take black people working together, like the black single mother issue, as well as black men specifically becoming more loving. It's not gonna happen just by men being siloed off to one side and women being you know, caged off to the other side. It's gonna take our interpersonal relationships with each other, our connection with each other, our connections with each other's families, our connections with each other's kids, for us to really move the needle on believing. When we believe in each other, it's easier to believe in ourselves. And that was it for chapter 8. We are now on chapter 9, heterosexual love, union, and reunion. Bell Hooks states, bonds of affection and love that are forged in the midst of profound trauma and oppression have a resiliency that can inspire and sustain generations. Free black women were few, and any black male, free or slave, who wanted to have a union with a black woman had to confront the reality of slavery and indentured servitude. All bonding, which did not serve the interests of white people, was deemed suspect and threatening. And honestly, I believe that still persists today, that black people being in union, not even from only a heterosexual love standpoint, but it's actually really insidious that these are things that we're still struggling with today, that didn't happen that didn't start because of us. Like, you know, we came here having already been stripped away from something, and even through the systems of American slavery and what came after that, black people had a way of protecting their romantic unions even through the struggle. So within this, Bell asserts that we must infuse the history on enslavement with historical references to and realities of free black people as well. These arguments reflect the experience black people brought to America in bondage and eventually experiencing antebellum and Jim Crow Southern conditions. I think it correlates with the sentiment from Loving Black Masculinity that only one population is being having a magnifying glass put on it versus what was happening in other contexts as well. There have always been a diverse faction to blackness. Like, not all black people are poor, not all black people are uneducated, and that's not to say that to be that is good or bad. It just is. Like, there's just it's just always been different factions within American blackness. I think that gets painted over a lot, and people don't acknowledge that, you know, a lot of our experiences are not only regional, differ by our complexion, differ by our national heritage, because there's black people here now who didn't grow up here, that just were sent here for school from other African countries. Like, all of our experiences are not the same, and that's okay. It's okay to acknowledge all of our multitudes of experiences. She says that free and enslaved black folks fought hard to privilege these relationships by rituals and ceremony, both illegal and legal. They recognized that solidifying these bonds, gaining public recognition of their value, was crucial to the freedom struggle. The desire to create long-standing partnerships served as the catalyst inspiring individuals to fiercely resist bondage and work for freedom. White supremacist thinking is always challenged by loving unions between black people. Sheds light on where there have been so many obstacles placed in the path of such unions. White supremacist thinking is always challenged by loving unions between black people and sheds light on why there have been so many obstacles placed on the path of such unions. Which, hey, I believe in, first of all, we need to, because I think a lot of the relationships, unfortunately, where black people are in their black love journeys, there's a lot of people who, or at least, I won't say a lot, because not everybody's union is marred by struggle, but I think it explains the interracial dating phenomena, because a lot of people have just been indoctrinated to, like, it goes back to that thing of like picking on each other is what is turning everybody away from each other. And so that's why, you know, people are falling into the arms of people of other cultures who black people are perceiving as more welcoming than our own. So it's it really is an internal problem. So we all need to be looking within about why our community is so marred by what our ancestors have been through. Afterwards, she says that even our lived experiences indicated that the model of communal kinship with gender equality was both more constructive and more realistic in a world where employment was and is hard to find for any black person. You know that we see a lot of, I think just because of that thing I talked about where black women are outpacing black men in education in this day and age. And so I would go so far as to say that employment has been harder for black men just because it's all, well, a lot of the way that you get a job now is based on your intellectual capacity. And when you've fallen behind in school or not valued it in the ways that a lot of black women have, that is, to me, that is why there is a career gap between us. I think that's where we are currently. A lot of black people can't seem to agree on how to have a union and a family and a household together because the dynamic of how we earn has changed. She said her father was a janitor and was adamant that no wife of his needed to work, even if that meant material lack. To him, supporting his wife and family affirmed his manhood. This affirmation took precedence over material needs. She also says that male domination does not lead to happy homes. If there were no jobs for the vast majority of black men, how could they assume the role of providers? So, I mean, I guess the dynamic has been like this. It's just that an avenue has opened up for black women who focused on their educations, which is a lot of us, because a lot of us were told, you know, we were being told not to be fast, to cover up, to not deal with boys. And I think that a lot of black men perceived academic black women as stuck up, but it was really more so I know, at least from my experience, I was being sheltered. And for a lot of women who were either in my position, there were a lot of women who were either in my same position, black women, or they were on the opposite side where school was their safety net because they knew what was happening out in front of them was not how they wanted to live, which is honestly a miracle for a child to be in an environment where everybody is doing one thing and they take a different path. Black women have always worked. Black women have always worked, but we used to make, you know, it would be that either, like she said, her father didn't want her mom working, and they just weren't materialistic. So they lived in a way that wasn't materialistic in any way, shape, or form. And I think in today's world, because materialism has grown so much, that yeah, really you're not gonna find any person who, because I've been in situations where people didn't want to date me because I didn't have enough. So not just men or women, like both men and women are looking for material gain, which primarily for Black people is not coming from, well, not primarily, because like I said earlier, not all Black people are poor and in poverty, but just to speak from my own experience, yeah, we didn't have it like that, but there are a lot of people out there who want that, and I think that that is part of the issue with Black heterosexual unions. So I said, if there were no jobs for the vast majority of Black men, how could they assume the roles of providers? And then just as black women feel enraged that Black men do not deliver the economic goods, Black men feel enraged that they are expected to provide. But I don't know if I even mentioned this in there, but for me, this correlates to what I want to say is that I don't understand being enraged by enriching your own community, because it seems like a lot of Black men are more so in competition with other men than invested in growth of family, union, women, and children. I think we're in a time where a lot more Black women, but that's, no, I can't even say a lot more Black women. Black women have always worked. We've always worked. So it's not like we're looking to get in relationships at large just for the material benefit. I think most women understand that we have to work, except for the delusional ones who want to be kept wives, which I wonder how many men out, but that's the thing. That's within a system of capitalism. Everybody cannot do that, and we can still cultivate lovely, enjoyable, fruitful lives without being the top 1%. I don't necessarily believe in being average. I don't want it to be perceived as that, but it's like most of us are. Like the people who, not everybody's gonna be Beyonce. Not everybody's gonna be the millionaire. And I think that really that's not what our values should even be. Like, I think Black people as a collective need to rethink, what are our values? Are our values money and materialism, or family and personal integrity and education and honesty, or idolizing celebrities? Like, it really just needs to be a conversation about what is the collective value. Can we be a collective? Can we be a collective? Because there's people who don't even want to be a collective. I told somebody earlier this week, the quality of our lives is based on the quality of questions we ask ourselves. So what questions are you asking yourself about? And I feel like, this is a video really only for people who care about the health of the Black community as a collective. Because yeah, if this isn't even something you care about, it should, yeah, you could just click off. This is more so about people who are Black and care about Black communities, Black collectives, and want to build with Black people. So yeah, that's really what this boils down to. Because in my mind, while you don't feel enraged by people you want to be with and around, but that's the thing, I think the rage is valid, but it's misdirected. Because are you enraged about being expected to provide? But who put that in place, the expectation to provide? I don't think women didn't put that expectation in place. That was put in place by, the system that black people in America came to, be. off of the backs of slaves who came from Africa. Like, that's how this whole system came into place. So again, is this something we even want to keep doing? If the men are enraged by the expectation to provide, and then the women are disappointed by the lack of being able to deliver on that provision, then what are we doing? I guess that's the real question. No one talks about how economic injustice creates context for emotional strife in domestic households. All groups of men who are unable to provide for their families often feel as though they are emasculated. Many men have long resisted this socialization. Material deprivation caused by exploitation and oppression based on race and class meant that gender roles in Black life could not conform to sexist norms. Solidarity was needed to ensure survival. And that's just really what it is. Like, Black people in America, yes, we can progress. We can. But there are a lot of people who don't know, who don't even have the basic fundamentals on how to succeed. And so when you get that in a cycle, that is why we have all these people who don't invest in education, who don't invest in teaching their children how to read, who don't invest in making sure that their child is safe, is in an environment that is consistent and structured. These things are not happening in a vacuum, because I know that there are Black people out there who don't understand the reality of being Black and impoverished and oppressed and exploited. Because I think that there are Black people who had the opportunity to be free at a certain time. For a lot of Black people, that was not their experience. Alternative gender arrangements, even when they were productive and fruitful, these arrangements were often regarded as wrong by men and women alike. When the contemporary feminist movement began, it labeled Black women already liberated because Black women had to work, because, you know, what we got freed, but then they gave us pennies in wages, so both people had to work. So a 1966 essay by Abby Lincoln, Who Will Revere the Black Woman, says Black full-grown males said that Black womanhood is the downfall of the Black man. That the Black woman is evil, hard to get along with, domineering, suspicious, and narrow-minded. Dang. That's messed up. Because the same way, I think that a lot of, I guess during that time, maybe they forgot that we were being controlled by a system, and it wasn't just Black women that created this scene. Like I said, it didn't happen in a vacuum, which is to say that, like, I've already said it, Black women were working because of the systemic problem that Black people weren't getting paid fair wages. While white families in America could provide for the wives to stay home, Black women were being contracted to help those women in their homes. So while Black men were out working the railroads, doing construction, coal mining, driving the buses, or I don't even think they was doing like city jobs at that time, but I think that that's what it has become now. That's what it's morphed into now, where Black men end up doing a lot of the city service work, while Black women do the service work of rearing the children, while our children get neglected in the process, and then we just continue the cycle. Because that's literally what it is. Because you'll find Black women who are, still today, you'll find Black women who are social workers, nannies, teachers, daycare workers, and yet so many have to work so much that they're not actually able to invest their time into their own families. And I guess in a lot of ways it's morphed into, because shout out to millennial women. A lot of us waited to have kids. Like, to be honest, I don't know, I think a lot of people I went to school with now have kids, but not a lot of us had kids in college that I knew of. So shout out to us for getting educated first. But it's like a suspicion on the part of black men about if we're going to use our intellect to quote unquote emasculate them. I think that is a strange term, because how can another person take your power? Another person can't take your power unless you let them. So if black women are evil and suspicion and domineering, it's because you gave away that power. Like, at what point do you take your power back and say, like, but I guess part of taking the power back is for in this context would be to take the power, take on the same power as the white man, versus consulting and working with black women to say, hey, because I know that a lot of black women don't want to do it the way that white people are doing it. We don't want to be housewives. We don't want to stay at home and rear the children, because it puts you in a position, historically, it's put a lot of women in the position where you can go off and do what you want to do, and that person doesn't have any resources. And so why is it that is the expectation, that we should go into relationships with nothing and leave with nothing? I don't get that. That's basically the expectation on both ends, because they're upset when we become baby mothers, but then they're also upset when we go to school first. So which one is like a which one is it type of deal? But I said, so after reading all that it set a scene for abuse, domination, and separation. Today's popular lyrics express cynicism about love. Lust and struggles for power define the nature of heterosexual black romance. Yeah, it's a power struggle. It's because black women were afforded being able to work. But it's like, we were slaves right alongside y'all, so we've been working this whole time with y'all. So it's like, we get it. Whereas white women have had the luxury to be blinded and maybe keep a certain innocence about themselves. But it's like, is it innocence or is it delusion? Because, like, let's be serious. We're in the real world. It's not a fantasy land. We see that the housewife stuff didn't work out for them. It didn't work out. They're trying to get back to it, but that's to say that they went a different way at one point, and now we're trying to get back to that, but haven't thought about why they got away from that in the first place. Because time makes you forget. But you know, the cycles that black people are in, we can't forget. Since marital unions between black men and women were devalued and couples were separated, this pattern of devaluation continued even after slavery ended. Where is the lamentation for the woundedness and brokenheartedness that has marked and marred unions between black men and black women? Right. Like, I think that social media has created a landscape for people to just talk and talk and talk, and nobody's actually, I said it in the beginning of this video, nobody is talking about their real lived experience. Y'all just coming up with hypotheticals of overrepresented populations in media. Like, what are people actually thinking and feeling? Are y'all not sad that we can't find love? I know I am. We all deserve love. Everybody on earth deserves love. And it is my opinion that just people do better in life when they are around people who look like them, that they can see themselves in. People who are a reflection of them. But we have to get better at that part for us to get to the love part. We got to get better at the communication part for us to get to a point where we can enjoy love with each other. So next chapter in the book is called Embracing Gayness, Unbroken Circles. Bell Hooks starts with saying that legalized racial segregation meant that black communities could not expel gay folks. Patriarchal thinking led to the erosion of loving values in black life. 60 militants black blacks made homophobia a criterion for authentic blackness. And this is seen still today with Dr. Umar. Although I respect a lot of things that he says, he has a very misguided view of, or just a narrow view of what blackness is and what blackness can be. In my opinion, I believe that queerness has been around since the dawn of time. Like, whenever people could find each other, they loved on each other. That's just what it is. Whether a man and a woman found each other and decided to go continue a life, whether two men found each other and started to go and build a life, whether two women found each other and decided to go build a life, whether a trans person and another non-binary person found each other and decided to, you know, go on with life. Like, people just group together based on, really at a very basic level, being human. And then on top of that, within the world we live in, based on their color, which is what she's saying in this. Like, because black people were segregated, it wasn't getting I feel like this idea of shunning gay people is just weird. And one, we couldn't do it back in the day because it's like you embraced people based on the racial segregation, so it really didn't matter what their sexuality was. And I think that honestly there's just too much emphasis by black people being put on what our sexual identity is, and like, we have bigger fish to fry, which is why I'm making a video like this. She continues with, or maybe this is something I wrote down because it's not in quotations. Sorry, I think I put a little too much moisturizer on my face and my eyes are watering. These men had valuable criticisms of racism, but made the mistake of portraying the message of love, tolerance, and kindness as something that could be correlated with the deviance of homosexuality, which is basically saying that, like, I think I was thinking about this last night, like this idea that people choose to be gay, but I think part of what people mean when they're saying that people are choosing to be gay is because we know that it's not accepted, that it is considered a lifestyle, although heterosexuality is seen as the default, which makes the other an alternative, which is to say that nobody is calling heterosexuality a lifestyle, but on the other hand, you call gayness a lifestyle, and a lot of times it's not accepted. You get put out on the street as a teenager, which makes you susceptible to predators. A lot of people end up, you know, being on the streets for many years, getting hooked on drugs. And so I think that is what people mean by choice and lifestyle, because of how not accepted it is. It's only a lifestyle because it's not accepted, really, is what I'm probably really trying to say. Black women sharing close ties with each other, politically or emotionally, are not the enemies of black men. Andre Lord added, the black lesbian has come under increasing attack from both black men and heterosexual black women. In the same way that the existence of the self-defined black woman is no threat to the self-defined black man, the black lesbian is an emotional threat only to those black women whose feelings of kinship and love for other black women are problematic in some way. For so long, we have been encouraged to view each other with suspicion, as eternal competitors, or as the visible face of our self-rejection. I was thinking about that last night too. Let me finish my quote. Lord's essay urged black people to remember our history and allow our historical struggle against domination to lead us to resist all forms of oppression. Rightly, she urged black folks to challenge homophobia, because that's really the only way we'll actually change and move forward. Bell Hooks continues by saying, homophobic hatred encourages heterosexual folks to feel they have the right to determine the legitimacy of any person's sexual identification, and with that, the compulsion to disempower women's voices based on those women having an alternative lifestyle than submitting to patriarchal male leadership, an issue activist Angela Davis and others face. Bell Hooks asserts that straight black folks should collectively acknowledge positive contributions of gay folks to black liberation. Further than that, to connect to today, I know so many dyke aunties and punk uncles who provide and nurture down, okay? Seriously. Especially, I just moved here from Atlanta. Like, that is the gay auntie, gay uncle hub of Black America. Like, to be honest, punks and dykes is really the backbone of the Black community, the silent backbone of the Black community. While so many heterosexual folks are running around having babies, a lot of the people who get left with those babies are their siblings. And because when you have so many children, they're all not gonna come out the same. Yeah, a lot of the rich aunties and uncles are the gay people. Like, I think that's the part that's not clicking for a lot of people. Like, you ask a lot of baby mamas and baby daddies how they're getting help. Now, I think it's through their siblings, which this is not to assert that everybody's siblings are all gay. But within that sibling pool of who these baby mothers and baby daddies are getting help from, it's the punks, it's the dykes. And yeah, really through my experience with LGBTQ folks, is that they really are 10 toes about community. Whatever their chosen community is, like, they will take care of you because they know what it's like not to fit in at this point. They know what it's like to be abandoned. They know what it's like to not be accepted by people who look like you. And so a lot of times they are even more welcoming than the typical heterosexual Black person. I think what many straight folks are afraid of is the influence, which is understandable, but these are often the same people who let electronics and media raise their kids. Literally same point that I just made. Like, the people who are picking up the slack within our community are often gay people. Like, the only reason that people's kids are being influenced by this is because y'all are letting TV and media be the primary learning source. So you really can't, I mean, you can be upset, but what are you gonna do about it? Point blank, period. So there's a quote from June Jordan that's in the book that says, sexuality does not necessarily reflect politics, which is very true. I have met conservative dykes, conservative punks. I remember having a conversation with a friend from college years ago. She's masculine presenting. She wore dresses in college to different events, which I think was to appease her mother. And like, this conversation we had was years after college, and she was just downing. She fell in line with religion. Although she was a masculine presenting Black woman, her idea about the way she existed, she felt it was wrong. And so I think she was telling me that she would never marry a woman, just based off of like the stigma around being a woman loving woman. And honestly, that was so strange to me. Like, I felt bad for her to think that lowly of yourself. But imagine the types of messages that gay Black women are being sent. Even in my own experience, I was discouraged from going down the lifestyle of being a dyke. But it's like, if that's where all the love coming from, because me, I go wherever the love is, and it's love over there. Hey, what can I say? So Bell Hooks goes on to say that rejecting others because one does not approve of their sexual preference is wrong-minded and downright cruel. Black gay men have been the group of males at the forefront of anti-sexist efforts in Black life. Many individual Black women would know no love from Black males if it were not for emotionally fulfilling bonds of care established with non-sexist loving Black gay men. Anyone mired in self-hate cannot love anyone. Gay activist Joseph Beam was one of the first out Black men to seriously address the issue of heterosexual Black male and gay Black male interaction. These words, which fail, are precisely the words that are life-giving and continuing. Fear of homosexuality has led many adult Black men to withhold their love from male children and adult peers. I see that turning around a lot, I will say. Until Black folks openly address same-sex incest, which is talked about in Belly of the Beast. I don't remember the name of the author, but I'll probably end up doing a video on that book because it was really good. So until Black folks openly address same-sex incest, because it's happening, the sexual abuse of Black boys by older males, because that's happening, self-love will not become the norm for all Black men. Self-loving Black men do not fear being gay. For a people whose bodies have been subjected to all manner of torture and degradation, who have been persecuted on the basis of our skin color over which we have no control, the foundation of our survival with our humanity intact has been our willingness to change domination. And lastly, she says, the love healthy gay males and females offer each other and us all is vital to loving Blackness. And that's all, period. Closing remarks on this chapter is really, like, I keep mentioning this, but nothing is like the ways that we are not happening in a vacuum. Like, these behaviors come from somewhere, and I think that, you know, sex is natural, and people tend to have sex with people they're in proximity to. I don't even think it's about a necessary sexuality. It's just about what's being represented to you, what you have access to, what you see, and the people who are in proximity to you. So if you're able to cultivate a loving relationship with a person who is of the same sex as you, it doesn't make you bad. It just means that that is your choice, and it's nothing wrong with that choice. I think I also wanted to mention, like, so she mentioned like all of the degradation, torture and degradation that we face, and one of the ones that we don't talk about is the sexual because yeah, I feel like it's talked about earlier in this book about women, Black women being raped, but to be honest, I think that men were being raped as well. Like, you're not convincing me that they was only taking Black women's sexual autonomy. They was taking all of our sexual autonomy really as a torture tactic, not even as a sexually gratifying tactic. It was more about the power and control. But with that, in the same ways that Black women have taken back our erotic power and able to, you know, show ourselves publicly in ways that by many people is not seen as positive, I think it's the same thing for people who are gay, Black people specifically who are gay. Like, that's just part of what the experience brought on. Like, the same way that Black women being raped created mixed children, like Black men and Black women being raped, it forces us to stop looking at each other, not wanting to look at each other, and in turn, you know, behaviors that are not the most, I don't know how to describe it, because I don't want it to be like, oh, because for me, I've said this before, I'm not trying to emulate what white people are doing, but I think at the same time, Black people need to evaluate what we are doing and think about, is this what we want to be doing? Because I don't think there's anything wrong with being gay, but we need to actually be embracing each other so that the LGBTQ people in our community can be safe, right? Because that's what I see a lot of people who get put out on the streets. That's who's being picked up by predators. So when you kick your child out of the home for being gay, for being fast, for being pregnant, because yeah, it's bigger than sexuality. It's just sex itself, because that's really the thing that I think be sending parents over the edge to make them kick their kids out or whatever. It's the act of just them being a sexual person, right? It don't even be about the sexuality, because the only people who get to still be in they at least among Black people, Black Americans, the only people who get to stay in their family's good graces by having sex and producing children are Black men. Because when Black girls get pregnant, they get shunned and berated. That's why I come from a place that had a multitude of pregnancy schools, or basically schools that were set up for girls who became pregnant. I knew a girl in high school who was pregnant twice within our 4 years of high school. And I wouldn't necessarily say she was shunned. She was being groomed. If anything, she was being groomed by a grown man. I guarantee you whoever that was she had a baby by was grown. And so we need to start addressing sexuality holistically. Like it's bigger than just like gay, straight, in my opinion. Chapter 11, Loving Justice. She talks about the eradication of Black self-hatred. Since so many privileged class Black individuals live far away from the war zones, there is no sense of accountability to the lifestyles of those Black folks who are stuck in lower middle class or poor neighborhoods ravaged by predators. While Black male leaders usually denounce predatory violence among the underclass, the vast majority support imperialism and militarism. That's the part I don't be understanding. I don't understand that. So there was, I made some little notes in here. I don't know if you can see, but I think at the end of the book, because early in the book she talks about how educating children through people who don't look like them is a detriment, but then at the end she says, basically she's saying that Black children in schools are mocking, ridiculing, and terrorizing their teachers. And I'm like, but that's because they're going into communities that's not theirs. They're getting mocked and ridiculed and ran out of the school because they're not supposed to be there, in my opinion. She said this cynicism about the capacity of white people to support anti-racist struggle is a cruel mockery of the history of civil rights. It denies the incredible gift offered us by anti-racist white people who have sacrificed time, safety, prestige, and in some cases their lives in the struggle to end. I said they don't deserve recognition. And I'm not sorry about that. Like, it's not, just like it's not their fault until white people take accountability for their ancestors, because they live off the wealth and the money of their ancestors, but they aren't willing to take accountability for the way society is now because of their ancestors. And I think at the same time, Black people are like, well, we're not taking responsibility for what our ancestors went through either. I think both sides need to take accountability. And she says we must live what we preach, and money will never heal Black America. I said that in 2020, and like I had people Instagram and Twitter mad at me, but well, basically what I had said was that Black businesses and Black capitalism won't save Black Americans, and it's true. People didn't like it. People thought, it was one girl, she had like a consignment shop on Instagram, and it's like, that's really not pushing nothing. That's making you money. You having an online boutique is making you money, but what are we doing for the people who are ignorant to the way that the system works? Because that's really our biggest problem, the education gap. It's not about like, oh well, this person didn't pull themselves up by the bootstrap. You can't pull yourself up by the bootstrap when you barefoot. So, you know, and I'm all for, I think that people should be sovereign, people should be self-sufficient, but they need the resources in order to do that. They need the education, they need the language, they need the tools. And so I guess my question to my people is that, how do we bridge the gap so that more of us have the resources to be sovereign, more of us have the resources to be autonomous, more of us have the resources to divest from white supremacy? Yeah, I've been planning this video since January, I will say, and a lot of different things have come up in media, but I think just talking about the book in itself is valuable.